Hi there, I'm Arya, and I want to thank you very much for joining me once again as we look into yet another horrific internet tragedy as we continue our investigation into the question of whether or not the worst monsters are no longer hiding in the darkness, but are out here in the light of the technology beaming right into our faces. Before we begin though, I do have to acknowledge and apologize for the Kyle Newman video that went up on the Unsolved network a little while ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably for the best. That said, it definitely was not the best idea to put the Kyle Newman video up on a channel that deals with actual true crime cases, and I really should have known better. It was honestly just a very misguided attempt at trying to do something new, and I have to take full responsibility for it, and I'm very sorry. I honestly really appreciate those of you who have watched and enjoyed my content, and I'm sorry to those of you who I may have disappointed and whose trust I may have broken. Hopefully though, we can slowly rebuild that trust and that someday you can enjoy my content once again. And I guess what better way to get back on that path than to cover an actual true crime case. Today we are looking at one of the most notorious attempted murders in all of internet lore. A tale in which two 6th grade girls nearly stabbed their best friend to death at the behest of a creepypasta character, the Slender Man. One detective on the case described, "They're living their own creepypasta story." You don't often see this with adults, and to have this happen between 12-year-olds is absolutely horrifying. But before we get into the details, let's look back into the history behind this urban legend. In the mid-2000s, creepypasta, or spooky digital content disseminated en masse by forwarded chains or message boards, became an incredibly popular internet niche. The myth of the Slender Man was born from a creepypasta competition. The comedic online forum Something Awful asked for submissions under a thread called Create Paranormal Images. From the name itself, it was presumed that photoshopped images showcased contributors' skills. On June 8, 2009, a user under the handle Victor Surge, later identified as Florida resident Eric Knudsen, posted 2 photos of a figure he had created using his imagination and a computer: the Slender Man. The first photo showed a tall, slim, supernatural figure in a formal black suit, creepily seen in the shadows behind a group of teens. His second photo was photoshopped to have a fake library seal and showed several children smiling at a camera, but in the background, the Slender Man summoned another group of children toward him. I remember the first time I saw those Slender Man images, and I was freaked out for sure. I'm still a bit of an avid reader of places such as No Sleep on Reddit, so these creepypastas, these stories certainly intrigue me, and I guess that's why I'm fascinated by this case. Honestly, let me know in the comments down below what your favorite creepypastas are, because I could always use some more late night reading material. Users of the site were impressed and spooked, and the post went viral. Within days, others began to Photoshop images of the Slender Man, hauntingly hidden in the background of innocuous photos, videos, or drawings. You can almost never see his pale face. It is either blank or completely faceless. Some people have created images of him with tentacles, as well as his unnaturally long, black-suited arms and legs. Those who see him were said to lose their memory or their minds, or perhaps they disappear entirely. Eventually, the Slender Man became ubiquitous across the internet to the point of legend. Some call him the most popular modern urban myth. A character became so notorious, he is often cosplayed at comic or anime conventions, and he has inspired feature-length films and TV shows like Doctor Who. The silence. That was for my Whovians out there. I preferred the Weeping Angels. Up until they decided to make them move. Unfortunately, some internet users took the fictional narrative as truth, disregarding the Slender Man's imaginative origins and insisting he was real. 2 of these impressionable fans were a pair of 12-year-old girls from the small town of Waukesha in southeastern Wisconsin. Their names were Morgan Geiser and Anissa Wire, and because of their devotion to the Slender Man, they conspired for 6 months to murder one of their best friends, Peyton Leutner, who was also 12 at the time of her assault. Peyton and Morgan became friends in the 4th grade, reportedly because Peyton felt bad for Morgan, who she thought seemed a little lonely. Eventually, Peyton, who enjoyed Morgan's sense of humor and imagination, considered her a best friend. In the 6th grade, Morgan became obsessed with the Slender Man, which Peyton found to be odd. She said, "It kind of frightened me a little bit, but I went along with it. I was supportive because I thought that's what she liked." As Morgan's belief in the Slender Man and his gruesome stories grew, Peyton began to recoil. Even though she knew he wasn't real, because she had asked her mom, She was so uncomfortable. She thought about ending their friendship. Another factor affecting their relationship was Morgan's budding friendship with another 6th grader in their school, Anissa Wire. The girls had only recently met, but they lived in the same apartment complex and had been riding the bus together. They fed off their mutual love of Slender Man lore. Peyton later described, "I didn't like Anissa at all. I just hung out with her because I knew that Morgan really loved her as a friend, but she was always cruel to me. I feel like she was jealous that Morgan was friends with me." Peyton says that when she tried to pull away, Morgan began to guilt her and she couldn't go through with it. She didn't know that at that time, Morgan and Anissa may have already been planning her murder. Anissa and Morgan had fallen under the belief that the Slender Man could speak to them telepathically and that he lived in an abandoned mansion a 5-hour drive from their hometown. They hoped that by murdering Peyton, they would prove the Slender Man was real and become his proxies. They also feared that if they didn't kill her, the Slender Man would hurt them. Anissa would later testify, "I believe if I didn't go through with the plan, Slender Man would come and attack and kill myself, my friends, and my family, those that I care about most." They had at least 3 plans for killing Peyton, but as the wheels of the murder were set into motion, several setbacks made them realize they were going to have to improvise. On May 30th, 2014, the 3 girls gathered to celebrate Morgan's 12th birthday. They went to a roller rink, got frozen yogurt, and settled in for a sleepover, where Morgan and Anissa planned to murder their friend. The girls had conspired to duct tape Peyton's mouth as she slept, and then stab her in the neck. But after a long day of play, the girls were too sleepy and tired to go through with it. I mean, that's wild. Sorry, I'm just processing right now that they were 12. Seeing it through the perspective of them being 12-year-olds really hammers home just how twisted this entire situation was. By early the next morning, May 31st, 2014, playing had commenced again. As Peyton changed into a pink dress for a dress-up, the other 2 girls came up with a new plan. They would kill her at a park in a bathroom stall where the drain could wash away her blood. Normally, the girls would not be allowed to go to the park without an adult, but because it was Morgan's birthday, her mother allowed the trio to enjoy the sunny morning alone. Before the girls left, Anissa and Morgan grabbed a knife from her kitchen. Both girls would later deny taking the knife, each pinning the action on the other. When they got to the bathroom stall in the park, the girls once again got too nervous to go in for the kill. Instead, they lured Peyton to the nearby woods for bird watching and a game of hide and seek. Anissa said of their plan by now, "Morgan and I were going to be like lionesses chasing down a zebra. I was going to tackle her, and then Morgan was going to do the stabbing." When you think about all this planning that they were doing, yes, they were 12 years old, but there was such a level of calculation that went into this. It's hard to kind of find any sort of justification for this based on their age. As part of the game, Anissa told Peyton to lie on the ground and cover herself with sticks and leaves, then walked a few feet away and shouted, "Now," and Morgan sprang into action. Peyton was tackled and pinned down. Morgan stabbed her as Anissa egged her on. Morgan stabbed Peyton 19 times, later saying of that moment, "It was weird. I felt no remorse. I thought I would. I actually felt nothing." For their victim, the attack was a blur, which she was thankful not to remember. Peyton was still alive by the end of the assault, but barely. Morgan and Anissa stared blankly at their bleeding friend, then told her to lie still and be quiet so she wouldn't lose blood as quickly, and that they would go for help. They were lying. The last words Peyton spoke to her former best friend, Morgan, were, "I trusted you," and "I hate you." I'd say the same things, if not more. After Morgan and Anissa left, Peyton found reserves of strength she did not know she had. She crawled, and using trees for support, made her way to an opening in the forest, where she finally collapsed again on a patch of grass. At around 10 a.m., a passing bicyclist came across her body at the dead end of Big Bend Road and called 911 for help, seeing stab wounds over her arms, legs, and torso. Officer Dan Klein was the first to respond to the call and says that when he got there, she wasn't moving a whole lot. As I approached her, I said, "Hi, I'm Officer Dan. Are you okay?" She said, "No." As I got closer, I started to see a little bit more blood, and the closer I got, the more blood I saw. She told officers on the scene that her best friend, Morgan Geiser, was the person who had attacked her, and that another girl had been with her. Peyton was brought to the hospital and immediately wheeled into surgery to treat her critical injuries. The cuts on her legs and arms were relatively superficial, but 2 of the knife wounds on her torso had punctured major organs. One had sliced through her diaphragm, puncturing her liver and stomach, The other went through her heart, missing a major artery by only a millimeter. Dr. John Kellerman, one of the surgeons who operated on Peyton for over 6 hours that day, said of the wound, if the knife had gone the width of a human hair further, she wouldn't have lived. Her recovery was said to be miraculous, and she was released from the hospital on Saturday, June 7th, a week after her attack. Can we just take a moment and give a huge shout out to Peyton? What a fucking badass. I mean, she gets stabbed almost to death, within a hair from dying, finds the strength to crawl her way to safety to help, and she gets out of the hospital in a week. I mean, badass. Meanwhile, detectives went to Morgan Geiser's home to speak with her mother, who told them the identity of the second suspect and that neither had returned home. Police began their search for the girls, who spent 5 hours walking in the direction of the Slender Man's alleged home, where they hoped to take shelter, and were found sitting on the side of a freeway. One of the detectives recalled, they were kind of dirty, covered in some stains. Their demeanor was very calm. They seemed kind of meek, if you will. The police took both girls in for questioning separately. They both admitted to trying to kill Peyton, but each named the other as the instigator. Anissa told investigators that Morgan had been the one who told her, "We have to kill Bella," which was Peyton's nickname. Anissa told investigators everything she learned about the Slender Man online, adding, "I actually thought he was real because I saw him. We were like talking on the bus. I look out the window and I see this thing standing like this with tendrils there and gone like that." On the other hand, Morgan told investigators, "Anissa told me we had to because she said that he'd kill our families. A man. I didn't know him, but Anissa knew him. I didn't really understand what we were doing, but I really didn't want to make Anissa mad." Investigators searched Morgan's room and locker and found a lot of evidence indicating that despite her interview, she was likely the ringleader of the murderous plot. Her notebooks were filled with drawings and musings about the Slender Man. She had mutilated her dolls to have their hands cut off, arms cut off, legs cut off. She had thousands of questionable internet searches on the subject of murder, and ironically, she had emailed Anissa a warning to wipe her browser history. In the wake of the stabbing, Slender Man's creator Eric Knudsen expressed his sadness for what happened. Writer Zach Parsons, as a representative for Something Awful, was a little less sympathetic and called the girls dumb as hell. He continued, "Slender Man is ridiculous. He has been organically sourced to the crowd and the crowd is dumb. The Slender Man fans can invest their dumb lives in the story just like Doctor Who fans or comic book fans or Welcome to Night Vale fans or any other fandom. We don't want your fandom's blood on our hands." Both girls were charged with attempted first-degree intentional homicide and were set to be charged as adults rather than minors, facing up to 60 years in prison. In August 2014, Anissa took a last-minute plea bargain, admitting to a lesser charge of attempted second-degree intentional homicide. In return, the jury considered her claims of insanity, so she could not technically be found guilty and would be sent to a mental institution instead of prison. In 2017, she was sentenced to 25 years in the Winnebago Mental Health Institute. Morgan also cut a deal, pleading guilty to attempted first-degree intentional homicide, and she too was found not guilty by way of insanity, sentenced to 40 years in an institution. Morgan was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia and psychotic spectrum disorder, extremely rare conditions at her age. However, her father also has schizophrenia, making her genetically predisposed to delusions. She later told psychiatrists she could communicate with other fictional characters such as Harry Potter and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Her mother has said since of her daughter today, Morgan's untreated mental illness is what made her a danger, and she is no longer a danger. Her illness has been treated very successfully. In March 2021, Anissa petitioned the courts for her release, citing that she had completed every treatment available to her at the mental institute. Unable to prove that she was still dangerous, on July 1st, 2021, the judge ordered her release after just 3.5 years. However, pending another hearing on September 10th, 2021, Anissa is still being held at the mental hospital. If she is released, officials will monitor her until she is 37 years old, the full duration of her original 25-year sentencing. Peyton endured a long road of recovery, both physically and emotionally. To this day, she sleeps with a pair of broken scissors under her pillow and has a hard time building trust in close relationships. But a spokesperson for the family described her progress over the years, saying, "We've seen her go from a victim to a survivor." Peyton says that her experiences have inspired her to go into the medical field and also issues a warning. Parents need to talk to their kids directly, saying, "This is not real. This is fake." And I have to agree with her, because in this uncertain world, both digital and physical, where children can be exposed to so much without their parents' knowledge. It is so important to teach them skills online that can protect themselves and others from the dangerous people, or even dangerous myths or ideas that might overtake them. I mean, if we're going back to our primary question of whether or not the worst monsters are no longer hiding in the dark, or if they're in the light of the technology beaming in front of our faces, in this case, the monsters in Peyton's life weren't actually digital ones. They were the ones standing right in front of her, having sleepovers with her. However, these monsters were influenced by the digital world, by the internet. I guess if we were to ask the question of, whether this would have happened at all had Morgan or Anissa not known of the Slender Man, it'd be easy to say yes, but however, considering Morgan's diagnosis of early onset schizophrenia, I don't think we can rule out the possibility that perhaps, she may have found some other justification in her mind for going through with this act. All we have, though, are the facts as we know them, and what we know is that the Slender Man, as imaginary as he is, played a part in a very real event. And I honestly have nothing but the utmost respect for Peyton, who truly is not a victim, but a survivor, and a badass, and a warrior. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join me on this story. And as always, if you have a case that you'd like me to cover in the future, please shoot me a message, and maybe next time the story being told is one that you'll have sent in. Either way, as always, thank you for your time, and stay safe online.